My name is Claire Evans, and a year ago I sold everything I had to save my husband from prison, only for him to walk out a free man, hand me divorce papers, and tell me he was sick of me to his bones. That's not the part that broke me. What broke me was realizing how blind I'd been, how much of myself I had erased in the name of love. When I first met Daniel, he was the kind of man you notice even in a crowded room. Confident, smooth, the type who never looks rushed, but always in control. We met at a Chamber of Commerce mixer in Charlotte. I'd just landed a big client for my consulting business, and he was this rising executive everyone wanted to talk to. He complimented my presentation, said I spoke like someone who didn't just know the rules, but wrote them. That line made me laugh, and something about the way he looked at me made me feel seen. Daniel had that energy older women often fall for: calm certainty. No games, no youthful ego. I was 42, divorced once, no kids. I thought I knew better. But Daniel made me believe that maybe I'd finally found someone safe. We started seeing each other that week. Dinners turned into weekends. He listened, really listened, when I talked about the years I'd spent building my firm from scratch. He'd ask questions, curious and respectful. "You should teach this stuff," he once told me. "People would kill to have your discipline." I didn't realize then how much he was studying me, not admiring me. Within a year, we merged our work. His finance experience, my operations. It made sense, a small logistics company built on trust and shared vision. That was his phrase, shared vision. I used to write it in our meeting notes like a promise. The business took off. We worked late, laughed often. I remember one night sitting on the floor of our new office, eating cold takeout. He looked at me and said, "You make chaos look elegant." I fell a little more that night. It wasn't perfect. Daniel liked control, subtle, not loud. If I made a big decision without asking, he'd smile and say, "Next time, loop me in, okay." It sounded gentle, but the way he said it made me feel like a child. I told myself, that's how teamwork works, compromise. Looking back, that was when I started shrinking. The first time he raised his voice was over money. A deal went sideways and we lost a client. He slammed his phone down, muttering, "You just had to push your ideas." I froze. He apologized. An hour later, brought me flowers. Said stress made him stupid. I forgave him. Older love, I told myself, means more patience. 2 years in, we bought a house together, a white colonial with a porch swing and oak trees out front. He said it felt solid. I thought we were building something permanent. Then came the first audit. Just a small one, routine. But I remember his face when the letter came, pale tight. He brushed it off. "It's nothing," he said. "Paperwork stuff." He didn't want me involved. I didn't push. The months that followed felt strange. He was distant, snappier, always on calls. One night I woke up to find him in the living room, whispering into his phone. He said it was a client in another time zone. I believed him. Because that's what you do when you love someone you believe. By spring, the company's numbers weren't adding up. He said cash flow, timing, taxes, words I didn't question. I didn't realize how deep the hole had gotten. Then one Tuesday morning, as I was making coffee, 2 men in dark suits showed up at our door. They flashed badges FBI. My hands shook so badly I spilled coffee down my robe. Daniel came downstairs, calm as ever, told them it was a misunderstanding. They left with files and his laptop. He kissed my forehead afterward and said, "Don't worry, I've got this handled." That was the first time I saw real fear in his eyes. That night I sat on our bed reading through bank statements. There were transfers I didn't recognize, large ones moving in and out of shell accounts. I confronted him. He brushed it off again. "You don't understand finance, Claire. Please trust me." 3 days later, he was arrested. Wire fraud, embezzlement, false reporting. The newspapers called it a white-collar scandal. For me, it was the day my world stopped. Our friends disappeared. Clients vanished. Reporters camped outside. I spent my days fielding calls from lawyers and my nights staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything had turned so quickly. Then came the call from his attorney. If we can raise $3.8 million, he can make bail and start negotiating a plea. Otherwise, he's done. I remember just sitting there, the phone pressed to my ear, listening to the hum of silence after that number. 3.8 million. Everything we had, everything I had built was tied up in the company. Selling would mean starting over. But when you've loved someone long enough, reason sounds like betrayal. So I said yes. When Daniel walked free, he looked lighter, younger, relieved. He hugged me outside the courthouse and whispered, "You saved me. I thought that meant us." I didn't know then that it meant him. That night I drove us home in silence. He talked about rebuilding, about starting fresh. I nodded, too tired to think, but as we pulled into the driveway, he turned to me with that same calm voice that once made me trust him. "There's something else," he said. And before I could breathe, he handed me a folder of divorce papers. "I'm done, Claire. I've been done for a while. You should have seen this coming." I don't remember crying. I just remember the sound, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the soft click of the door as he walked out. People think betrayal is loud, but in real life it's quiet. Part 2, the call that changed everything. The morning after he left the house felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else. His coffee mug was still on the counter, half full, the ring of dried espresso marking where it had sat for hours. It's strange what details stick in your head when everything else falls apart. You don't remember what you said. You remember the way the spoon was turned, the quiet. For the first few weeks I lived in that silence, the kind that hums. I avoided mirrors. I stopped answering calls. The papers said Daniel Evans was under investigation again, that new evidence had surfaced, that federal prosecutors were reviewing his plea deal. I didn't react. I'd already run out of reactions. Then, one Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. The voice on the other end was polite, but sharp, the kind that doesn't waste words. "Mrs. Evans, this is Special Agent Keller with the Bureau. We'd like to speak with you about your husband's case." I corrected him automatically, ex-husband. There was a pause, then he said, "Of course, ex-husband." They met me at a small diner off Highway 74. I remember because the waitress kept calling me hon and refilling my coffee, like she could sense I needed something to hold on to. The agents were direct. "We believe Mr. Evans may have hidden assets," Keller said. "There are accounts that don't match the documentation we received during discovery." I stared at him, trying to follow the words. Hidden assets. Discovery. My brain felt thick, like I was underwater. "I don't know anything about that," I said. And that was true mostly. When the meeting ended, Keller handed me his card. "If you find anything, emails, records, statements, call us." On the drive home, I thought about how calm Daniel had been when the FBI first showed up. Not panicked, not surprised, just ready. The first time I told myself he was unlucky. The second time I realized he was prepared. That night I couldn't sleep. I walked through the house, the empty walls, the stripped shelves, the boxes I hadn't unpacked since selling everything. My life fit into a few cardboard squares. I opened one-marked files just to fill the space. Inside were old tax records, client invoices, partnership documents. Nothing unusual. Then near the bottom, a faded yellow folder. The label said 2017, pending. I almost threw it out, but something instinct curiosity, whatever you want to call it, made me open it. There they were, copies of wire transfers, not from our main accounts, but from something called Riverside Holdings LLC, a name I'd never seen before. The transfers matched dates I remembered, the same months when we'd struggled with cash flow. I sat at my kitchen table until dawn, tracing each transaction with my finger. Daniel had moved money, large amounts, into that shell company months before his arrest. And it wasn't empty. There were withdrawals too, all after he was supposedly cut off from our finances. At sunrise, I made coffee and stared out the window at the street. Retirees walking their dogs. A paperboy tossing the morning news. The world moving indifferent. That was the first time I said it out loud. He used me. The words felt heavy but clean, like truth finally landing after too long floating around. The next day, I went to the storage unit where we'd kept our business archives. It smelled like dust and old cardboard. I spent hours digging through boxes, finding more connections, signed agreements, bank statements, with signatures that didn't match mine but carried my initials. He'd forged them. He'd been planning this for years. I drove home on autopilot, gripping the wheel so hard my hands ached. At a stoplight, I saw an elderly couple holding hands in the crosswalk. Something about that image, two people still trusting after all those years, broke me. I pulled over and sobbed, the kind of sob you can't disguise. But after that, I didn't cry again. When you hit the point where there's nothing left to lose, there's a strange calm that settles in. You stop caring what people think. You start thinking clearly. I made a list that night. Every file, every name, every number I didn't recognize. It wasn't about revenge yet. It was about understanding. A week later, another call this time from Daniel himself. His voice was smooth, rehearsed. "Claire," he said, "I need your help." I laughed. Couldn't help it. "You already had it," I said. "You spent it." He sighed. "They're coming after me again. Keller's been asking questions. You need to destroy anything that looks suspicious for both our sakes." That line, "for both our sakes," stuck with me, like he still thought we were a team. I didn't answer right away, just let the silence hang. He filled it nervous for the first time. "Claire, listen. You think you hate me, but they'll drag you down too. You signed half those documents. You were my partner." Partner, the word burned. When the call ended, I sat in the dark for a long time. I realized something: he was scared, not for me, for himself, and that meant I had power. That night, I poured a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and started scanning. Every document, every transfer, every thread that tied him to that company. I labeled, sorted, saved backups. By midnight, my kitchen looked like a crime board. Sticky notes, printouts, arrows, and in the middle, his name. I could have called Keller right then. I didn't. Not yet. I wanted to see the full picture first. 2 days later, Daniel showed up. No warning, no call, just his car pulling into the driveway like nothing had changed. He knocked, smiling like a salesman. "Can we talk?" I let him in. He looked thinner, older eyes darting like someone watching for shadows. He tried to sound casual, but I could feel the tension. "I know you're upset," he said, "but if we work together, we can fix this." I poured coffee and sat across from him. "You mean if I cover for you again?" I said. He flinched. "Don't twist this." I pushed the folder across the table, the one labeled Riverside Holdings. His eyes widened, just slightly, but enough. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "You left it with me," I said. Silence. Then he smiled, that fake, easy smile he used when lying. "That's nothing. Just paperwork from an old deal." "Sure," I said. "Just paperwork." When he left, he looked rattled. He didn't know what I planned. That was fine. I didn't either, not yet. But I knew one thing: I wasn't covering for him anymore. That night, I sat by the window, watching headlights pass, and whispered, "You should have never come back." Because for the first time since he'd walked out, I wasn't the one afraid. I still remember the first time I sold something that mattered years ago, long before everything fell apart. It wasn't the company or the house. It was my mother's piano, the one she left me after she passed. It sat in the corner of the living room, collecting sunlight through the bay window. I hadn't played it much in years, but the day I watched two movers wrap it in blankets and haul it away, something cracked. Not loud, just a quiet snap inside. That feeling came back when I started selling the real things: the company, the house, the car. This time, it wasn't nostalgia, it was survival. It started practical, almost clinical. Lawyers, accountants, signatures, liquidate assets, they said. Speed matters. I moved through it like a ghost. I signed papers without reading them. I nodded when people spoke. It felt like watching someone else's life disassemble one file at a time. The company went first, the one I built from nothing. I walked through the office one last time, the smell of printer ink, the hum of the AC, the empty desks. My employees, most of whom I'd trained myself, stood silent as I signed the sale agreement. I couldn't meet their eyes. That signature felt like tearing off my own name. Daniel's lawyer was there, too tall, man expensive, Thai voice like glass. He said, "You're doing the right thing. Once this clears, Daniel can negotiate for probation." Probation. That word was supposed to sound hopeful. It sounded like surrender, like calling it mercy when it's really defeat. After the company, I sold the house. The realtor, a young woman named Erin, tried to sound kind when she said, "At least the market's good right now." Her eyes flickered over me, the ring still on my hand, the hollow look. She knew this wasn't about the market. When the buyers came for a walkthrough, I stood outside on the porch, arms folded, watching strangers measure rooms I'd once decorated for anniversaries and holidays. One of them said, "It's got good bones." I almost laughed. So did we, I thought. Good bones. The rest rotted anyway. When the house sold, I didn't celebrate. I packed one suitcase and left the rest behind, furniture, photos, all of it. I told myself I'd come back for them, but I knew I wouldn't. There's something final about signing a sale contract. You think you're just losing property, but really you're giving away every version of yourself that lived there. Next was the car. A black Lexus I'd bought brand new the year the company first turned a profit. The salesman who took it back didn't recognize me. I looked like a different woman, older, hollowed out. He offered a handshake. I just handed him the keys and walked away. That afternoon, I wired the money, all $3.8 million of it. The number sat on the screen, impossible to process my entire life, condensed into a string of digits and a send button. My hand trembled when I clicked it. I remember thinking, this is what love costs when it's one-sided. A few days later, I got the call. He's free. The lawyer sounded cheerful, like he was giving me good news. I thanked him, hung up, and sat in the dark kitchen for hours. I didn't cry. I just listened to the clock tick every second, a reminder that I'd done the impossible and that it hadn't changed anything. When Daniel came home, he looked different, lighter somehow, the way people look when they finally get what they want. He hugged me, said, "You saved me." I nodded. I wanted to believe he meant it. We sat down for dinner that night, just the two of us like before. He talked about second chances, about rebuilding. I listened, trying to find traces of the man I used to know. Then he said, "I'll handle the finances this time." Something small in me recoiled. "I think I can manage my own accounts," I said. He smiled, that polite, dismissive smile that used to charm me. "Claire, please, you've done enough. Let me take care of this." That was the first time I realized he didn't see me as a partner anymore, just a tool that had finished its job. A week later, the papers came. Divorce documents, a plain manila envelope, no note, no explanation. Just that one line in his neat handwriting on the last page, "I'm done." The moment I saw it, I laughed, a short, sharp sound that didn't belong to me. I called his lawyer, asked if this was some mistake. He said, "No, ma'am. Mr. Evans has decided to end the marriage amicably. He's willing to divide remaining assets evenly." "Remaining?" I asked. He cleared his throat. "Well, half of what's left after the bail expenses." Half of what little I had left. When I hung up, I didn't move for a long time. Then I started cleaning. That's what you do when your life collapses, you clean. You try to organize the chaos as if order could undo loss. I scrubbed the counters, boxed up old clothes, threw out the leftover takeout containers. When I reached the bedroom, I stopped. His side of the closet was empty, not just of clothes, but of presents. I sat on the floor and laughed again, softer this time. Not bitter, just tired. That night, the house felt heavier, quiet in a way that pressed on your chest. I poured a drink, stared out the window at the dark street, and realized something I'd built my whole life around a man who'd never planned to stay. People always say hindsight is 20/20, but it's not. It's cruel. It shows you the truth too late to matter. I thought about the first time I met him, how sure he seemed, how solid. I thought about that word again, safe. That's what I'd wanted. Not excitement, not fame, just safety. But with Daniel, safety had been the bait. When I finally went to bed, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the sound of a house too big for one person. And for the first time, I felt something shift. Not rage, not revenge, just awareness. Awareness that I'd hit the bottom, that there was nowhere left to fall. And sometimes that's where strength begins. I can still see the way the folder looked on the kitchen table that morning, thick cream-colored, sealed with that little gold clasp. I'd seen hundreds of folders like it in my career. Contracts, deals, partnerships. This one was different. This one was a death certificate for everything I thought was real. When I opened it, I didn't feel shock. I felt clarity. It was all there, printed, neat and tidy. Petition for dissolution of marriage. My name, his name, signatures. He'd already signed his part, dated 3 days earlier. 3 days. Meaning while I was still wiring money to his lawyer, still praying he'd be released, he was finalizing how to cut me loose. The man who used to hold my hand through every decision had already decided I was disposable. He didn't even hand it to me himself. His lawyer did. A knock on the door, a polite smile. "Mr. Evans asked me to deliver this personally. Then he was gone, leaving the echo of the latch clicking shut behind him. I stood there holding that folder for a long time. Then I did something that surprised even me. I laughed. It wasn't joy, not bitterness either. It was disbelief. The absurdity of it all. I'd sold everything for a man who couldn't even look me in the eye when he ended it. When Daniel finally called that night, his tone was casual, like we were talking about dinner plans. "Did you get the papers?" "Yes." "I think this is best for both of us," he said. "You'll be fine, Claire. You always land on your feet." That line, "You'll be fine." That's what people say when they're walking away and want to feel noble about it. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I said, "You should probably thank me." For what? For your freedom. There was a pause, then a sigh. "Claire, don't make this harder than it has to be." I hung up. The next morning I went downtown to sign the documents. The clerk barely looked at me, just flipped pages, pointed where to initial. Her pen clicked in rhythm. I could hear the echo of every click in my chest. When it was done, she slid a copy toward me. "All set. You'll get the finalized decree in about 6 weeks." 6 weeks. That's how long it would take for my marriage to officially end. I walked out into the cold air and stood on the courthouse steps. The city moved around me, traffic voices, the faint buzz of life continuing, and for the first time I realized the world didn't stop when your life falls apart. It just keeps going. I spent that afternoon driving aimlessly. I ended up at the lake where we used to walk on Sundays. The water was still silver under the winter sky. There was a bench near the pier, our bench. I sat there until my hands went numb. Couples passed by kids, laughed, dogs barked. Life doing what life does. It hit me then, he wasn't coming back. Not the man I'd loved, not even the version I'd tried to save. He was gone long before I signed that paper. That night I boxed up the last of his things. His suits, his books, the cologne that still smelled like expensive betrayal. I left them on the porch for him to collect. He did quietly the next morning before dawn. I know because I saw the security camera footage later. No note, no knock, just him glancing once toward the door before walking away. I deleted the footage after watching it once. For weeks I tried to stay busy. I volunteered at the library, joined a yoga class full of women my age trying to stretch out grief in silence. But the truth was, I felt hollow. I'd been so focused on saving him that I didn't know how to save myself. Friends reached out, old college acquaintances, people from church. "You'll get through this," they said. "You're strong." Strength. That word again. People throw it around like it's free. But strength costs. It costs sleep. It costs peace. Then one morning, I woke up and didn't recognize my own reflection. My eyes were dull, my skin pale, my mouth set in a line I didn't remember forming. I realized I'd been living like a ghost in a house full of echoes. That same day, I received an envelope in the mail from Daniel's attorney again, inside a list of remaining joint assets, or what was left of them. The line at the bottom said it all, remaining balance to be divided equally between parties. I stared at the number, half of what little remained, maybe 100,000, out of the millions we once had. I laughed again, softer this time, the kind of laugh that comes from exhaustion, not humor. But something shifted that afternoon. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was resolve. A small voice in the back of my head whispering, "This isn't where your story ends." That night I made tea, sat at the kitchen table, and read through old emails, years' worth of them. I wanted to understand how I'd missed it, how I'd missed him. Every red flag looked obvious now. The way he redirected questions, the small lies disguised as reassurance. Love really does make you deaf in the moments that matter. Before I went to bed, I took off my wedding ring. I didn't throw it or cry over it. I just set it in the drawer next to my passport, two relics of identities that no longer fit. When I turned off the light, I whispered to the dark, "You win, Daniel." But somewhere deep down, even as I said it, a quieter voice followed. Not for long. The first night alone, after the divorce was finalized, I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet. Not peaceful quiet, empty quiet. The kind that hums through the walls like a reminder. Every creak, every drip from the faucet sounded like time mocking me. I kept the TV on for background noise, some old rerun of Columbo, but even that felt wrong. His voice was too calm, too certain. I wasn't sure of anything anymore. By then, I'd moved into a small rental house on the edge of town. 2 bedrooms, beige carpet walls so thin I could hear my neighbor's dog barking at midnight. It smelled faintly of detergent and someone else's life. I told myself it was temporary, but truthfully, I didn't know where permanent was anymore. I woke up each morning out of habit, not purpose. Made coffee I didn't finish. Checked emails I didn't answer. Bills, legal updates, spam. The digital leftovers of a life that no longer belonged to me. A few friends tried to visit. One of them, Linda, brought a pie and said you should get away for a while. A trip maybe I smiled and thanked her, but I couldn't imagine going anywhere. I didn't want new views. I wanted my old life back, or at least the illusion of it. I found myself driving sometimes no destination, just miles of highway and silence. I'd stop at gas stations, buy a coffee, and sit in the car watching strangers. Couples arguing, kids begging for candy, old men buying lottery tickets, life moving forward while mine stayed frozen. The lowest point came one night in late February. Cold, damp, that gray kind of winter that makes the air feel heavy. I'd been sorting through old paperwork again, tax files, property records, whatever I hadn't thrown away in the last purge. The goal was simple: organize, clean, move on. But move on sounds easier when you haven't lost your sense of direction. I was halfway through a box marked 2018 to 2019 when I found an envelope. No label, just sealed thick with folded pages inside. Curiosity beat exhaustion. I tore it open. Inside were photocopies of emails correspondence between Daniel and someone named Riverside Holdings, LLC. That name again. The same one from the yellow folder I'd found weeks earlier. The dates matched the months right before his arrest. The messages weren't dramatic. They were transactional, cold. But I could read between the lines: transfers, shell accounts, false invoices. There was even one short note from him that made my skin crawl. Move the rest before she notices. That was the moment everything in me went still. People talk about heartbreak like it's explosive yelling, crying, breaking dishes. Mine was silent, just the sound of paper sliding off the table as I let go of the envelope. I remember thinking I was financing my own betrayal. I sat there until sunrise, staring at nothing. At some point, I realized I was shaking not from cold, but from clarity. By morning, I couldn't look at my reflection. I didn't want to see the woman who'd ignored every sign, the woman who'd traded everything for a man who was already gone. I showered, dressed, and drove to the lake, same one where we used to walk. The bench was still there. A family was feeding ducks nearby, their laughter drifting across the water. I sat hands in my pockets and felt like a ghost watching someone else's life. I thought about walking into the water, not to die, just to feel something sharp again, something real, but I didn't. Instead, I closed my eyes and made a promise to myself: you will not let this be the end. That night, I poured a glass of wine and opened my laptop. I started reading through old business files, backups, archived emails, not to relive anything, to understand. There's a strange power in knowing exactly how someone fooled you. It doesn't fix the pain, but it gives it shape. Some of the files were familiar, others not so much. There were invoices for projects that never existed, payments to consultants I'd never met. It was all right there, years of deception hiding in plain sight. At some point, I started printing them out, laying them on the floor, sorting by date. My living room turned into a crime scene, the carpet littered with paper trails. I drew lines with a Sharpie between names, dates, amounts. By midnight, I could see it, a pattern. He'd been moving money slowly, precisely, always just under the radar. The anger didn't come all at once. It crept in quietly like a chill. For weeks, I'd been numb adrift. Now I felt focus, the kind that sharpens every sense. I poured another glass of wine and whispered, "You planned this, didn't you?" It wasn't a question. It was acknowledgement. The next morning, I called the bank, asked for copies of old statements tied to the company. The clerk hesitated, but eventually agreed. "We'll email them by tomorrow." I spent that day cleaning again, not the kind of cleaning that chases dust, but the kind that makes you breathe easier. I threw out old letters, clothes I'd never wear again, the rest of his photos. When I was done, the house felt lighter. That night when the email came, I opened it like someone opening a door they're afraid of, but can't ignore. Line by line, the numbers told the truth. Every consulting fee, every transfer, every loan repayment, all funneling to one place. Riverside Holdings, LLC. He'd used, our company used my name. Every signature, every decision traced back to me. No wonder he'd told me to destroy the records. But he made one mistake. He forgot who kept the books. That realization settled into me like a calm wind. I wasn't powerless. Not anymore. Later that night, I found myself whispering to the darkness again. Not prayers, not regrets. Just a single sentence I hadn't spoken in months. I'm not done. And for the first time since the day he handed me those divorce papers, I believed it. I didn't plan it like some movie revenge plot. There was no music, no montage, no grand declaration of vengeance. It started quietly, just me a cup of coffee, gone cold, and a folder full of lies. That morning, the sun barely made it through the blinds. I sat at the kitchen table in my robe, surrounded by stacks of paper. Each sheet told a story Daniel thought I'd never read. The numbers danced across the page like confessions. Transfers, signatures, hidden names, all of it right there in plain black ink. I thought about the night he'd said, "You'll be fine, Claire," and for a moment I almost laughed. Fine, maybe not, but awake, absolutely. For weeks after that, I made research my new religion. Every morning started with coffee and ended with another revelation. The more I dug, the clearer the picture became. Daniel hadn't been unlucky. He'd been deliberate. He used our business accounts to launder money through shell corporations, half of them fake consulting firms, the rest tied to contractors who didn't exist. There were offshore transfers too small enough to avoid red flags, but steady enough to build something big, something invisible. He was good, too good, the kind of good that only comes from practice. But here's the thing about people like Daniel, they think details are beneath them. They believe control means nobody else can read the fine print. That's where I had him. I'd spent 15 years building companies, balancing accounts, watching the smallest discrepancies ruin entire budgets. I noticed things he didn't. One of the consultants he paid was listed under an address I recognized, an old warehouse off Monroe Road. It had been abandoned for years. Another company name showed up on an old invoice template I'd designed. He didn't even bother changing the logo. That arrogance, that lazy confidence was going to be his undoing. I started documenting everything. I didn't have to be dramatic about it, just precise. Scans, timestamps, backups. I kept 3 drives, one hidden in a kitchen drawer, one in the freezer behind a bag of peas, and one on a cloud server under a fake name. Every night I'd pour a glass of wine, turn on the news, and organize the evidence like it was my new job. Because in a way, it was. This wasn't just revenge, it was restoration, the slow rebuilding of my sanity, one file at a time. Then came the day the FBI called again. Same voice, Agent Keller. "Mrs. Evans, we have a few follow-up questions if you're available." "I'm always available," I said. We met at the same diner, same booth, same waitress. I ordered coffee black. Keller was polite, measured. "We're reviewing financial discrepancies that appear to involve you," he said carefully. "Would you be willing to clarify your role in those transactions?" I leaned back. "You mean the ones Daniel forged under my name?" His eyebrows lifted. Forged. I slid a flash drive across the table. "And you'll want to start with folder 3. He didn't touch it yet. "Mrs. Evans, what exactly is this?" "Everything he didn't tell you," I said. "Bank statements, shell companies, false transfers. The works." He thought I burned it all. I smiled, small but real. I only burned what he could see. He stared for a second, then nodded slowly. "We'll be in touch." When he left, the waitress refilled my coffee and asked, "Everything all right, hon?" "Not yet," I said, "but getting there." That night I slept better than I had in months. No nightmares, no looping regrets, just stillness. Over the next few weeks, I kept going, combing through every detail, cross-referencing every alias, every transaction. There was one in particular that caught my attention, a transfer to an account under the name Devlin Group, LLC. The signature looked almost identical to mine, but not quite. The E in Evans curved differently. I zoomed in until I could see the imperfection. A forgery so close it would have fooled anyone else. I sent that one to Keller directly. His reply came the next day. "Thank you. This will help us immensely." A small, quiet satisfaction bloomed in my chest. Not joy, just validation. A few nights later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. The voice was low-tired. "Claire, it was Daniel." "I know what you're doing," he said. "Do you?" "They came to my office. The feds." "You gave them something." "I gave them the truth," I said. He went silent for a long moment. Then, "You don't understand what you've started." I almost smiled. "Daniel, I started this the day I believed you." He hung up. No threats, no yelling. Just a quiet disconnect, the sound of a man realizing the ground beneath him had shifted. That night I poured myself another glass of wine and watched the streetlights flicker outside. I wasn't sure how far this would go or what would happen next. I just knew I wasn't afraid anymore. When I closed my laptop, I looked around my little house, the empty walls, the scattered papers, the faint smell of printer ink, and it hit me. This was my battlefield. Not guns or drama, just truth, patience, and a woman who refused to be erased. And somewhere deep down beneath the calm, a voice whispered, not angry, just certain. Justice doesn't scream, it waits. I picked up the yellow folder one last time, smoothed the edges, and whispered, "Sleep tight, Daniel." Because now I wasn't chasing him. I was watching the walls close in. It was a Thursday morning when I heard the sirens. Faint at first, weaving through the hum of suburban stillness. I was standing in my kitchen, barefoot, coffee in hand. Outside the neighborhood looked normal people, walking dogs, kids waiting for the school bus sprinklers hissing across lawns. Then came the sound that stopped everything: tires, crunching gravel radios, crackling the low, mechanical click of car doors opening. They stopped in front of Daniel's house. I didn't move, just stood at the window watching. 2 black SUVs, 1 unmarked sedan, 3 men in plain suits, 1 woman in a jacket that said FBI. They walked like they'd done this before, calm, synchronized, professional. When they knocked, I could almost hear the hollow echo of it from here. A minute passed. 2. Then the door opened. I saw him, same haircut, same posture, though his confidence had melted into something brittle. He looked thinner. His hands twitched when he spoke. The agents didn't raise their voices. They just showed him papers. I saw the change in his face, that sharp flicker between denial and realization, the mask cracking. I didn't smile, not yet. They cuffed him at the doorway. He didn't resist. The woman agent said something, and he nodded, shoulders slumped. As they walked him down the driveway, I caught a glimpse of his eyes. He looked around, maybe searching for me, maybe not. But when he saw my house, he paused. I stayed behind the curtain. The whole thing lasted 5 minutes, maybe less. When the cars drove off, the street went quiet again. Birds resumed singing. A delivery truck passed by like nothing had happened. I finally sat down. My coffee had gone cold. I didn't care. Later that afternoon, Keller called. "Mrs. Evans, we wanted you to hear it from us before the news gets out. Mr. Evans was taken into custody this morning on charges of fraud, obstruction, and perjury." I didn't say anything for a moment. I could hear typing in the background, muffled voices. Then I asked, "Is that everything?" "For now," he said, "but I think it's enough." I thanked him, simple and short. When I hung up, I stared at my reflection in the dark window, not triumphant, not vengeful, just quiet. That evening, the story broke online. Former businessman Daniel Evans rearrested for hiding assets and falsifying financial documents. They called it a developing case. There was a picture of him being led into the courthouse, jaw tight, eyes blank. Friends texted me, "Did you see the news?" I didn't reply. Instead, I went for a drive. I didn't know where I was going, just out into the cool evening air. I ended up near the old office building where it all began. The parking lot was empty now, the windows dark. I parked, rolled down the window, and listened to the crickets. This was where I'd believed in him most, where I'd thought we were building something together, and now it was just glass and dust. I sat there until the streetlights flickered on. When I finally drove home, it was close to midnight. As I turned onto my street, I saw something that made me stop, a single car parked in front of my house. Not the police, not neighbors. Just a plain sedan. A man stepped out, Agent Keller. He smiled faintly. "I thought you'd still be awake." I invited him in. He didn't stay long. He just placed a brown envelope on the table. "This is a copy of the official statement. You might want it for closure." "Closure," I repeated. The word sounded strange in my mouth. He nodded. You did the right thing, Mrs. Evans. Not everyone could have done what you did. When he left, I stood in the doorway for a long time holding that envelope. The air outside smelled like rain. I didn't open it right away. I poured a glass of wine, turned off the lights, and sat at the table in the dark. The house creaked softly. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. Then I opened it. Inside were copies of the signed confession's financial records and a note written in Keller's neat handwriting. Your information was essential. Case now moving to federal court. Thank you for your cooperation. Below that, stapled to the corner, was a photo Daniel being led into a courtroom wearing the same suit I'd bought him years ago. His face looked empty. I don't know how long I stared at it. Eventually I laughed, not loud, not cruel. Just one soft breath that turned into a smile. People imagine revenge as fire, as rage, as some cinematic explosion of justice. But the truth, it's quieter. It's a slow unfurling of balance. It's waking up one morning, knowing you've stopped bleeding. A week later, I drove past the jail downtown. Not to gloat, just to see it. A gray building with narrow windows. He was somewhere inside, counting days. I wondered if he thought of me. Probably not. Narcissists rarely look back. They just wait for a new mirror. Still, I parked for a moment and whispered, "This is the life you built." Then I drove away. That night, I slept through till morning for the first time in a year. No dreams, no noise, just silence. When I woke, the sun was spilling across the kitchen counter, turning everything gold. I made coffee, opened the window, and listened to the world outside. Justice doesn't always knock loudly. Sometimes it's just the soft click of a lock closing behind the right person. And that morning, as the light filled the room, I realized something simple and true. I didn't hate him anymore. He was exactly where he belonged. It's been 8 months since the day they took Daniel away. The seasons have rolled by winter, melted into spring, into a long, forgiving summer. I still live in the same small house on the edge of town. The beige carpet doesn't bother me anymore. The walls, once too quiet, now hold their own kind of peace. I've rebuilt my routines. Mornings start slow coffee, the paper a short walk around the block. Sometimes I nod to neighbors I barely know. They smile back the polite, wordless kind of kindness older people share. I like that. No questions, no pity. Just acknowledgement that I exist, and that's enough. People think closure comes with a big moment, a courtroom verdict, a letter, an apology. It doesn't. It comes quietly, almost by accident. It comes when you're rinsing a cup or folding laundry and suddenly realize you didn't think about them all day. That's how it happened to me. I still remember the first time I felt it. It was a Sunday afternoon. The radio was on an old Johnny Cash song humming low. I was cleaning out the drawer, where I used to keep the backups, the flash drives, all the evidence. I found one I hadn't touched since that final meeting with the FBI. My first thought was to destroy it. My second was, no. So I put it in a box, taped it shut, and labeled it Keep Proof. Then I tucked it in the closet and closed the door. I didn't need to look at it anymore, but I wanted to know it was there, just in case the past ever tried to rewrite itself again. Sometimes I wonder what Daniel's doing in prison. If he's angry, if he's finally quiet. I don't wish him pain. I've learned that revenge isn't about suffering. It's about balance. He tipped the scales for years. I just nudged them back where they belonged. About 2 months ago, I got a letter from his attorney. It wasn't personal, just paperwork. But at the bottom, there was a short note in Daniel's handwriting. I hope you're happy now. I read it twice, then folded it neatly and slid it into the trash. Because yes, I was. Not the kind of happy you post on social media, but the quiet, steady kind that feels like breathing clean air after too long underwater. I don't go to church much anymore, but I've found something close to faith. Faith in consequence. In time. In the slow rhythm of cause and effect. When you get older, you start to realize the universe doesn't need your help keeping score. It just takes its time. I've started volunteering at the library again. Tuesdays and Thursdays. Mostly shelving books, sometimes reading to kids. There's a boy, maybe 10 years old, who always picks the same mystery novel and sits in the corner, pretending not to listen when I read aloud. He reminds me that curiosity can survive anything. On weekends, I drive to the coast. I park near the pier, buy a cup of chowder, and watch the waves. I used to go there with Daniel. Now it's just me, and somehow that feels right. The ocean doesn't ask questions. It just moves constant and endless. It forgives without forgetting. Every now and then, people from my old life reach out. A text from a former coworker, a holiday card from an old client. They all say the same thing. You look good, Claire. You look peaceful. I guess that's what survival looks like when it stops trying to prove itself. A few weeks back, I ran into Agent Keller at the grocery store. He was in line ahead of me, holding a carton of milk and a bag of oranges. He smiled, said Mrs. Evans. I corrected him, just Claire. He nodded. You did good. I smiled back. No, I just stopped doing bad. We laughed, awkward but sincere. Then he said something that stayed with me. Most people freeze when they're hurt. You moved. That night I thought about that line, you moved. It's true. Movement saved me. Not revenge, not anger, just forward motion, even when I didn't know where it was leading. Now every morning, I take a walk to the edge of the park near my house. There's a small pond there, nothing special. Ducks, willows, sunlight catching the surface. But sometimes when the light hits just right, the water turns gold, and I think about everything I've survived. I whisper, "You're fine, Claire," not as reassurance, but as truth. Because I am. Life didn't give me the ending I expected, but it gave me something better perspective. The kind you only earn after losing what you thought was everything. If you've ever been there, if you've ever given everything to someone who took it all and left you standing in the quiet, I want you to know this, it doesn't stay quiet forever. One day, the silence becomes peace. One day you wake up and realize you're not broken. You're rebuilt, different, sharper, free. So if you're listening to this right now, maybe sitting alone, maybe driving, maybe cleaning up the wreckage of someone else's choices, hear me when I say this. You can survive it. You can start again. You can keep the old files, but you don't have to keep the pain. And when justice finally comes, however long it takes, whatever form it takes, let it arrive quietly, like a door closing behind someone who never deserved to stay. Because peace doesn't knock. It just walks in when you're finally ready to stop waiting for it.